Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon, joined today by David Pereira, our product coach, advisor, and author, and someone who's become one of my most trusted voices in the product world. David is known for cutting through the BS in products. He has some hot takes and practical frameworks, and he helps us cut through the complexity to focus on outcomes and build products that people really can solve problems with. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about his internal and external templates, things that help you analyze both your market and your team to deliver strategic impact with differentiation, clarity, and real product focus. David, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me here.
First question for you today, David. You've been really outspoken about product management being really complicated. So tell us, what are some of the things that teams are getting wrong and what should they simplify first?
That's a very good question. So what I see, like many teams, they get busy with, I would say, the wrong things. They keep asking, what are the best frameworks to work with? Which would be the best tool? And then they start thinking, how do we use this tool better? How do we use this framework better? And so on. They do need tools, they do need some frameworks, but they should start with what they want to achieve and how we could get there. So if we focus on doing the framework better, we ask weird questions. For example, how do we start doing discovery with Scrum, LAS, or SAFe, or whatever it is? And then we miss the point, which is like, how do we uncover ideas that are actually worth pursuing? That's the only thing that matters. So we need to start with the end in mind and then figure out what to do to get there.
I love that answer. It's really focused on helping the team have a direction before they pick a way of working, because depending on the direction and the impacts, I think that actually changes the operational needs.
Yeah, it does change a lot. What happened is like today, like teams are doing more like the best teams, I would say, mix and match. So you don't follow Scrum by the book or Kanban, Scrumban. You say like, for these, I would take this practice from ShapeUp because would serve this particular need. And I may combine with something else because it's good for what we're trying to do. So you diverse your knowledge and then you select exactly what helps you.
Often you have told us about focusing on outcomes over outputs. We even heard it already in this interview. It's a real area of impact that you want teams to orient towards. So why do so many teams fall into the trap of the feature factory, and how do you help them break out of it? I know you have a whole book on this, so maybe just give us
Yeah.
a snippet.
Well, it has been the story of my life. I wrote the book on trapping product teams because of that. But the very first thing is like leaders, what they reward is what teams will do. So many teams will keep delivering features because they think it's good. And that's what happens. I was even promoted because I maximized velocity of the team. And what we need to understand is like more features will not guarantee more value. But playing the outcome game is way harder than delivering feature, because what is the end of features? We ship something, we move to the next thing, and then to the next, and to the next. We get busy very fast. But outcome, how do we know it creates the value we want? We need to measure the results. We need to iterate. And that's very uncomfortable for our nature. And how can we move from output to outcome? The very first thing is acknowledging that something's wrong. So we need to look at what is happening. One of the suggestions I have is create a report of the features you shipped over the last 12 to 18 months and ask one question. How often do people use that? You may be surprised that maybe 50% of the features are rarely or never used. And then you can ask yourself, should we keep doing that? Or should we do something different? And then you can run experiments and so on. But start small, and then you can move away from the feature factory.
So the idea is that if they gain awareness about the activation of the user and the engagement of the user, they will be able to better judge if those solutions were actually valuable. And it gets them thinking about value instead of just churning stuff out.
Yes, that's correct. And I mentioned only about the activation as a starting point because many features are not even activated. We could go on engagement, retention, and all of that, but just start with the awareness, the beginning of the funnel. How often are people using that? Then you reflect.
Okay, question number 3. As a product leader, how do you know when your team is truly empowered? So what are the things that you look for versus, just busy?
That's a very important question. And the first thing I look for, like the conversations that teams have. For example, if teams start having conversations very much project oriented, so we are doing this and that and so on, and everyone is busy and they start talking about this, for me, it's already a red flag. Why is it a red flag? Because we know that most of our ideas won't work. I want to hear conversations like, we ran this experiment, we learned that, and then we adapted to this direction. Or even if I come up with an idea as a C-level or something like this, someone looks at me and say, David, I have run experiments about it, and this is not working because of that. So the first thing leaders can do is to run a health check. For example, the one we created. They can use this template to start learning about their reality. It's again, recognize what is happening, and then you can say, what can I do different? Which elements do I want to see? And then you start driving change gradually.
So first, we encourage the team to use a health check of some kind and understand what kinds of things are they focused on. And then we as leaders step back and reflect what needs to change in this org. That makes total sense. All right, fourth one. How do you approach competitive analysis? Because up to now, several of the templates that we've talked about, they're much more internal focused and team oriented, but this one is definitely more market oriented. So tell us about your competitive approach to analysis and how do you make sure teams aren't just copying features?
First thing is about the mindset. You can never be a better shadow. If the only thing you do is look at the competition and copying everyone, everything you like, you will be behind. And you will not know why they are doing what they are doing. What I like is understanding the market. How crowded is that? How do our competitors position? What are they known for? And then once you understand the market, you can say, how do we differentiate? Where is our value proposition? So you start looking more holistically to the market and thinking about positioning instead of saying, oh, they created this AI feature. They are going to steal our customers. We need to do that. No, you don't. You need to look at your customers and think, how do we upgrade our customers so they are better at what they are doing? And for that, you have to go out and look at what is happening. And I wouldn't even say like panic and so on. Is understanding the market is always growing, developing, and so on. There are new startups popping up, and now with the I would say all the Gen AI, there are new startups all the time. But you should understand what is happening and saying like, what am I going to do about it so my customers will still love my product?
You're very much in the camp of talking to the customer, talking to the user to understand their perception of value and maybe finding that gap as well as looking at the market and what are other groups doing. I think that reflects in your template as well. It's got a little bit of what do you need and a little bit of what do you see, and using those two components to do your analysis.
Yes, exactly like that. Because if you see new features and so on, they may speak to you somehow. But what you don't know is why competitors decide to do that. It can even be that they just built that because another competitor did that. But if you are really honest to your customers, then you start with their needs, their ambitions, and you should understand them. The importance about the competition is being aware of what is happening, because you don't want to face a situation where you can be disrupted because you are outdated.
I think there's a high risk of that right now. In the world that's going on, the ability to vibe code your way out of a situation is just easier than ever, which is why I think that there's a real need to be more, make it a reflex. Every week I'm checking what's going on in my market and talking to my users and what's going on with them in order to keep tabs on both of that. Are their needs changing with the market, and what is the market doing? And those two things take up a lot of my time as a product leader right now. What do you think, if someone was going to start working and taking your advice, what's the one thing that they should start doing, and what's the one thing they should stop doing?
The one thing they should start doing is creating time to focus, to do deep work. So instead of letting the meeting marathon take over, what is your most productive time? You need to know that. For example, for me, is morning. I generally block my mornings so I can reflect. I can understand what is going on. And now comes one uncomfortable thing. I don't have clarity about what I'm going to do during those hours. But that's the important aspect, because then I will think what makes most sense. It's time to think. And most PMs, they don't have time to think because they're busy doing all the things. So that is the one thing they need to start doing. And what they should stop doing is getting obsessed on how they write backlog items, product requirements, or any of that. Because many people still ask me, how do I write better requirements? How do I write user stories so beautifully that any software engineer can implement without talking to me? That's just wrong. Because then, of course, they can implement without talking to you and without knowing the problem they are solving. So then you start doing handovers and so on. You want to foster collaboration and not limit software engineers to coders. Even if you use AI, you still want to have interactions with AI so you can iterate whatever you are creating, vibe coding and so on. So your role as a product person is to give context, not to control people.
I really want to highlight that piece that you just said, because I do think that it is a false understanding about the product job, that our job is to make sure that things get done. That's what a project manager does. Product is about ensuring the impact of what the team is working on. So I fully believe and really agree with your sentiment that it's about fostering that collaboration, that people really understand what are we trying to do here, but also what are we trying to get here. And sometimes that what are we getting conversation brings a different solution when they really deeply understand it. And having those conversations is how they get there, in my experience. It's not just about docs. Fully agree. That's all the time that we have for today. David, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. As always, got some great sound bites, some really good snippets. I love the "you can never be a better shadow." That's great. Really good for teams that are pushed to copy products, features from other places. And I think that this advice is just like your book, super practical, super pragmatic, and easily applicable. Thank you so much.
Thanks. It was a pleasure chatting with you.